He's going to throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, what's going on, guys? It's the Heel Tough Blog Podcast here with you on a rainy Monday in the Carolinas. As all of you guys are probably locked in, maybe you're watching a little bit of Monday Night Football or about ready to. Maybe you're locked in on the Braves game, but hopefully you're here enjoying this with us. Turn down the sound on that television and listen to a little talk about Carolina football, because that's right. Not only do we have to recap the win over NC Central, we also have to talk about a quarterback battle that now is back. If you even want to call it a battle, now it's apparently a plan where they're going to use both guys at quarterback. So we're going to break that down. We'll give you our opinions of what we actually think, one, is really going on, and two, if we think that this is actually going to happen, and what it could possibly look like if Carolina does choose to roll with two quarterbacks in a game against a team in James Madison that might not be as good as they were last year, but still might be good enough to cause Carolina some fits, especially if they want to roll with that plan. Now, one of the things that I wanted to start the show off with, because we just got an update on this right before we hopped on here. Mack Brown finished his radio show up in Chapel Hill. Earlier today, Mack Brown talked about offensive line coach Randy Clements, who was in the hospital and was dealing with some sort of infection that he had been dealing with for the last few weeks. We knew that before the season opener, he was hospitalized, but he did travel with the team. And, he ended up coaching in that first game. I think coached in the first two games, if I'm remembering correctly. And then was not on the sidelines to coach over the weekend. That meant that Corey Gaynor, who you guys remember him from last year, he was actually coaching the centers. And Kyle Jolly, who was actually one of Randy Clements' former offensive linemen at Baylor, who is a special assistant to him this year. And, of course, they are allowed to have those guys on the field, an analyst rather than assistant. Those guys are allowed to be on the field this year. So if there was any year for something like this to happen, it was this year, because you at least had those guys that could step into that role. But the good news is that Randy was apparently released from the hospital at some point today after Mack's press conferences and before he got on the radio show and talked to Jones Angell. So I know, buddy, that that you are definitely thinking about him and praying for him as well. Because this is, you hate to see a coach have to go through this, especially someone like Randy Clements, who we know is a really great guy and is really wanting to be out there coaching these young guys.
Yeah, just a scary situation.
for everyone involved. And this is something that, when they opened up camp, he wasn't there because he was in the hospital.
Mhm.
And, some 6 weeks later, he's back in the hospital. Hopefully we get this cleared up, and hopefully we get Coach Clements back to good health so he can be on the sideline the rest of the way. Luckily for him, the offensive line played well on Saturday to not make him even more sick than he already was. I'm sure he was be excited about that. But yeah, I think it's anything. It's a good reminder that these are coaches, but they are human and they go through health battles just like we do. Yes, they put in long hours and but they do have stuff going on outside of football. And a nice reminder that for these guys, yeah, you gotta work your butt off, and we want to have the best offensive line that we can have. The best way for that to happen, though, is for Randy Clemens to take care of his body. And hopefully this won't be an issue moving forward because he's a pretty doggone good offensive line coach. And if he's on the sidelines every Saturday, I feel a lot more comfortable about our chances to improve as a unit up front to be the best offensive line this team can be.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is that it kind of shows you that no matter what, man, no matter who you are, there are going to be health challenges in your life. And when something happens, man, go get it taken care of. If you think that something's wrong, then tell somebody, address it, because you don't want these things to extend further into your life. But we'll make the transition, as tough as it is, to talk about the team on the field. And you were right, man. His offensive line did a really good job, I thought, the other day, and led the way for the guy who really carried Carolina to victory. Carolina wins the game over North Carolina Central 45-10 to improve to 3-0. It's the third straight time that Carolina has started 3-0. And you may say to yourself, well, it's a 45-10 victory. How could you really be, that concerned going, about this game? Well, the reason why is because going into the fourth quarter of this game, Carolina was only up 17-10. Now they score 28 points in the final quarter. That's the most that they've scored in the final quarter since 2021 against Wake Forest. But I mean, that was something that you didn't want to have to see happen against an opponent like North Carolina Central. Great job by Trey Oliver and his coaching staff to have his guys ready to go and to have that group in the game. All credit due to them. Those boys fought incredibly hard. But Carolina, they probably didn't want to have to lean on Amari and Hampton the way that they did. But in the end, they had to. And he runs for 210 yards, 3 touchdowns on 25 carries. He wins player of the game for UNC on the offensive side of the ball, and then ACC running back of the week earlier today, as you would expect. That's the second time this year that he's taken home those honors. The thing is that you look at the performance, and we talked about the offensive line and how we thought that they played pretty well. He runs for 181 yards after first contact. So, I mean, look, I thought the offensive line did a pretty good job, but when you look at it, I mean, Amarian really did a lot of this himself. And I think it just continues to show us that right now, Carolina has one of the best running backs that we have ever seen. I know people were trying to talk about it on social media. Who's the best running back out of this group? Whatever. I think we can do that later in the season. We can do that after the season's over. But when you look at Amari and Hampton, how special of a running back are we looking at right here?
Yeah, he's one of the best to ever come through the program. Will he have the numbers of the all-time greats? Yes and no. Like, he's going to have some really ridiculous numbers, despite really only going to have, 2 legitimate seasons as the lead back, the feature back in the offense. It shows you how special he is, as physical a runner as he is. He finishes runs as well as any back we've seen wear Carolina blue. And Saturday, he was the heartbeat of the offense. He had the production we anticipated, but we didn't anticipate 25 carries. We thought this could be a game, 15, 18 carries. Hopefully he's not playing in the third quarter. Well, the Heels needed him all the way through the end of the game into the fourth quarter before they finally put away North Carolina Central, and you got to give them credit. They put together a game plan and they executed it as flawlessly as they could to make the game competitive and keep the game competitive as long as they could. And that was the case. But as the game wore long, Amari Hampton got stronger the longer the game went. Those 4 to 6 yard runs became 8 to 12 yard runs. And then those 8 to 12 yard runs became, 16 to 20 yard runs. And so it was a dominant performance by him, as you would expect against an overmatched foe. But, it was fun to watch him have that type of production. After leaving the game early last week against Charlotte, he bounced back in a big way and is back on pace to have the type of season we thought he was capable of having back in the preseason.
Oh, yeah, there's no worry about that. I mean, that was the performance that he needed to really make up what he did or what he wasn't able to do, rather, against Charlotte. I mean, you look at the last 2 games from him. Charlotte, he averages 7 yards a carry in that one. And then the other night, I mean, he was even better, 8.4 yards a carry. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And I get it's against an FCS opponent. But then when you factor in what he does after first contact, I mean, we thought when you had Javonte Williams, could it get any better than that guy running through tackles? And it might have with Amari and Hampton. That's what's just so impressive about him. And you're right. You didn't want to see him in the game that long. But there's a reason why you saw him in the game that long. And that's because Carolina just could not settle on which quarterback they wanted to play in the game. They started the game with Connor Harrell. He comes out the first 2 drives and didn't look great. He had one pass in particular on his second drive, that second drive of the game, where he tried to force a ball, nearly gets intercepted. There was no way that that pass was going to be completed. 2 guys covering a receiver on the outside. And we were all, I think, watching, and we're a little concerned. But I think at the same time, we thought, okay, he's just taking time to settle into this game. We'll see him back out there the next drive. Well, we get to the next drive. Jacoby Criswell comes into the game. And one of our friends who is on the sidelines for ESPN for certain games this year, she was on the sidelines for this game. And we text her, I did at least, and said immediately, hey, we need an update on Connor as soon as we get one, because what's going on here? I took her a minute to get back to us. And then when she gets back to us, she tells us that, no, this was actually the plan heading into this game, which was very interesting considering that we didn't hear anything about that going into the game. When you heard Mack Brown talk on Monday, it was Connor's the guy. And so Jacoby Criswell comes in and takes over. And I thought, for the most part, you liked what you saw from Jacoby. It wasn't, this game where he just takes over, throws for 300 yards, and everything looks like it's supposed to. But, I mean, look, 14 of 23, 161 yards, and a touchdown. And I thought you saw some really good things out of him. I thought when you watched him, you saw more confidence. You saw a guy that had better pocket awareness. And you just saw a guy that was more comfortable in the game, was making more anticipatory throws. You don't really see a lot of that out of Connor Harrell. With Connor, you see those happy feet. You see a guy that's still, I think, learning in the pocket. So, I mean, to me, you saw both quarterbacks. How do you feel on this? Because I think, from my perspective, if you're just judging off of this game, Jacoby was the guy that was the better of the 2 in this one.
Well, I think more than anything, you saw the potential of what Carolina's offense can be, which is with Jacoby, you have a guy that can push the football down the field. And we're going to talk about the wide receivers here in a minute because their production isn't where we thought it was going to be. Yep. I think a big reason why is the quarterback play. Simply put, as much as I like Connor Harrell, he can't get the ball down the field the way Jacoby Criswell can. He had 2 missed throws on deep shots, but the fact was, if you go back and watch it, he throws a pretty ball. Like, it's not so there isn't a lack of arm strength there. Like, yeah, he's got to reel in the accuracy, but like more than anything, you got to be able just to call those plays to really open up the defense. Because if not, man, you're already facing 8 guys in the box as it is. If you can't push the ball down the field, those safeties are going to play closer and closer to the line of scrimmage, making that much further to connect on big passing plays. He gives you that availability. He gives you that option. You see that even though he hasn't played a lot of football, he's been in college football a lot or for a long time. So there is, he's a lot more comfortable. There is some confidence. You can tell how smart he is because he's already picked up the offense to the point where, yeah, Carolina's hand got forced because of the injury to Max Johnson, but they felt comfortable enough to put him in the game as it already was. And remember, he got here late in the summer, so I think it speaks volumes about him in that regard. And so, look, I know that we really stumped for Connor Harrell, and really, made an argument for him to be this quarterback all preseason long, but simply put, in a game and a half, I saw more that I liked from Jacoby than I saw from Connor Harrell. And I saw more of what Carolina's offense can be moving forward into ACC play. And that's the type of offense that Carolina has to play if they want to, compete to maybe get to a place in Charlotte. So, I know Mack Brown says he's committed to playing both of them. He thinks like that they can juggle both and win that way. But I don't know how after you watch that game live or you go back and you reevaluate that film, you don't look at Jacoby Criswell and say, that's the starting quarterback for the Tar Heels.
And that's why I think what you saw him say today is probably somewhere along the lines of what he said before Minnesota. I think he's playing the game, man, because I think he probably knew last Monday that he wanted to get a look at both guys. They watched the film on Sunday. So he knew when he got up to that stand on Monday, I have a different plan than I'm telling the media. But I don't want to give out to NC Central that you also have to prepare for Jacoby Criswell. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that going on where he feels like, and to me, having both quarterbacks ready to go for the game is one thing. Saying that you're going to split the reps evenly in practice and actually going through with that could be a mistake because I know it's James Madison. I know it's a group of 5 opponent that is not nearly as good as they were last year. But that's still a dangerous game to play. And the 4th game of the season, that's something that could make some of the people in your locker room question where things really are going right now. Because I think you could look – I think the guys on the team could probably look and tell you that what they saw from Jacoby was a little better. I thought the intermediate passing game, you saw Jacoby Criswell be able to make more throws there than Connor Harrell was able to. Connor would make some, but you saw him miss. You saw the accuracy issues that when I heard it back in early fall, when they were talking about what guys needed to improve on, that really shocked me. But once you actually saw it in that game against Charlotte, when you saw him in the game against Minnesota, you saw those moments where you were like, oh, yeah, they're not lying. There are some struggles with accuracy here. Passes that are, I'm not going to say easy passes, but passes that you have to be able to make if you're going to be a starting quarterback for a Power 4 school. You then see Jacoby come in, and a lot of those similar passes he's able to hit. You're right. The deep ball clearly going to have a much better deep ball than Connor has. Even if Connor had a strong arm, which I think his arm is solid. I don't think he's a guy that's not able to throw the ball down the field at all. We saw it in the spring game. It's there. You're talking about Jacoby Criswell, a guy that when he was on campus with both Sam Howell and Drake May, people said he had the stronger arm of that group. So, yeah, he's got as big of an arm as anybody on this team. You need to have explosive plays. This offense, yes, there are times where they are able to move the ball methodically down the field. But you have to have that home run threat, especially this year when you're leaning so heavily on your running back to be able to pull those safeties down into the box and then have a guy in one-on-one coverage that can beat someone over the top and you throw a go route down the field that could lead to a touchdown, you got to have somebody that can hit those throws. And it feels like Jacoby could be that guy. Now, here's the ultimate question. So you say that you think that it should be Jacoby Criswell. I agree with you. I think at the least he should be the guy that starts the game and you ride him out until he proves to you that you need Connor Harrell because he's performing just that poorly. What do you actually think that Mack Brown is going to do, though?
I think for James Madison, they'll game plan for both. Just because, you got to figure out for sure, how Jacoby will respond to preparing, I guess, to be the starter. If he comes out and looks flat like Connor Harrell did, you probably have to think about going back to Connor. I think best case scenario is Carolina gets the ball Saturday, they march down the field and score. They get the ball back, they march down the field and score, and you don't really give that door to open up for them to go to Connor Harrell. And Carolina just rides Jacoby Criswell until either the season ends or we get to a point where they got to go back. They got to go back to Connor. The thing is that, and it's been a long time, Mack Brown's track record with playing two quarterbacks, it's pretty successful. If there's a coach that can do it, it's him. The difference is it's a different game than it was in the 90s, meaning that in the 90s, you weren't running these no huddle, up tempo, an offense that was really built on getting into a rhythm. You you ran a play, you went into the huddle, you maximized a play clock, you ran another play. Carolina doesn't do that anymore because no one does that anymore. You don't huddle. You basically call a play, especially now with the in-helmet communication. So it's a lot harder. Like back in those days, you could switch quarterbacks on back-to-back plays. Like that was a real thing. That happened. You're not doing that in today's football. And so I don't know how much of adjustment that would be for Mack Brown trying to feel out how to play both of them. So I think he'll prepare for both to play. But I think secretly he's hoping that Jacoby gives him a reason to not play Connor Harrell until the game is out of reach.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I found really interesting that he said is that these guys are really different. And that's the reason that there's different strengths for these guys. I got to be honest, I think they're very similar types of quarterbacks. Like we've seen before. We saw it when he was the backup to Drake May, or Sam Howell. Jacoby can run. Like that's an element of his game. Is he nearly as athletic as Connor is? No. I think Connor, you could just look at how the two are built and you could see that he is the more athletic of the two. But I don't think that means that Jacoby doesn't have that ability. So I don't really understand where there is really that much difference between the two. And to me, if there isn't that much difference between the guys, Jacoby is the guy that you should roll with. You're right. Even if he thinks that there is a plan to roll with two, that is incredibly difficult to execute. Hell, we saw it the other night when Jacoby leads a drive down the field. He throws a beautiful fourth down pass to John Copenhaver. Copenhaver drops the ball. Nothing that Jacoby did wrong. I thought it was a great throw. And, Copenhaver, who had a good night, by the way, just drops it. And the next drive, here comes Connor Harrell back on the field. And predictably, Harrell struggles and they go right back to Criswell. That's the thing, man. You cannot balancing two quarterbacks is one of the most difficult things to do in all of sports. And having to do it mid-season when you're getting prepared, this is your final tune-up before you get ready for conference play. My message to Mack Brown would be if you think that there is any chance that Jacoby Criswell is your starting quarterback, you need to play him and let him think this is a game where he is the guy and is going to be in there the entire way and see how he handles it. Because if he's your guy, you need him to be ready to go for conference play. Playing him with Connor Harrell, what's that going to do? So then you can turn around and say, well, now we've finally seen enough. Now we'll give you the entire week to prepare, but it's going to be leading into a game against Duke that could be rather important in the ACC with the direction that the conference is going. So, I mean, that's the thing. You're right. He's done it before, especially at Carolina, and he's had success. But I think you're asking way too much of these guys to have them go out there, split the time in a game against James Madison that is your last tune-up before conference play. Now, one thing that could really help them is if the wide receiver core would find some guys that emerge. And, yeah, part of it has been that the quarterbacks have struggled. There's no doubt about that. But you're talking about a team that is one of just 6 power conference teams to not have a receiver over 100 yards receiving on the season 3 games in. This is something that Carolina's got to get figured out. And it's just you're not seeing anybody really separate themselves. We thought first game of the year, what you saw from J.J. Jones, he would be the guy that steps up. The last 2 weeks, he's been almost non-existent. He has 3 catches, and he had another tough drop again the other day on another really nice pass that he should have had from Jacoby Criswell. They need somebody in this room to step up and prove that they are the guy, because right now, Carolina is relying on their receivers, on their tight ends. And if you just throw to your tight ends and backs, it's proven before that that does not lead to a lot of success, because those guys, they're not able to hit the big plays down the field. They're guys you look for, especially in the short passing game, a little bit in the intermediate passing game, especially the way that Carolina uses their tight ends, but it limits you. So somebody needs to step up here, and it needs to be soon.
Yeah, that's a mind-blowing stat, just considering the talent that exists in that room. You're talking about a J.J. Jones, a Nate McCollum, guys that have produced at a pretty, high level in this conference, heck, in this offense, and through 3 games it isn't there. I think part of it is the quarterback. You just had inconsistent quarterback play due to injury, due to, playing multiple quarterbacks. I think part of it is definitely they've left some plays out there on the field. And then I think one thing you gotta question is Chip Lindsey doing a good enough job putting the guys in position to get the most out of their talent and really really put them in position to make plays? I think it's fair to question that, just because I think they're definitely underperforming for what the talent in that room suggests. If this was a room that was devoid of talent, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. That's not the case. That room is talented. It's deep. You've got a lot of guys that I think can be high-level playmakers in this offense for Carolina this season that so far hasn't translated onto the field. So hopefully Carolina gets some stability at quarterback, and then this passing game can really take that next step. I love the emergence of the tight ends. I love the emergence and the utilization of the running backs in the passing game. But at some point, when you're playing the better teams this league has to offer, they can take that stuff away. And you got to be able to throw those intermediate balls over the middle. You got to be able to hit 1 or 2 deep shots to open up a defense. If you really want to be the type of offense that you aspire to be. So, we looked at this 3-game stretch as a chance for this offense to find a rhythm and find an identity. They haven't done it the first 2 games. Hopefully when we get to the field against James Madison on Saturday, we feel a lot more confident where this passing game ends going into ACC play.
Yeah, there is no doubt that it's on these guys because, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's going to become really obvious that you're going to want to look for your tight ends. I mean, the last 2 weeks, those have been the guys that have led you in receiving. It was Bryson Nesbitt against Charlotte, and then it was John Copenhaver this week. And the thing is, yeah, keep them involved. We want those guys involved. They're very talented. And I think that having those guys as players that you can rely on, it can only help you. But you've got to have other guys. And the thing that's stunning to me is the wide receiver room. You have had a receiver drafted in every single year since Mack Brown has been back. Lonnie Galloway has done an unbelievable job with that room. And I don't know how much is on them I just think it's that certain guys are struggling to create separation. To me, especially the thing that really stands out to me is that Nate McCullum, who was a guy that was bragged about in camp, how good he looked. He just, we haven't seen anything from him. They have to get incredibly creative just to get him the football. And even then, he's not really able to do much with it. Kobe Paysour, we haven't seen him a lot early on in the season. I don't know if that goes back to the injuries that he's had, but he's a guy that was so successful in this offense the last couple of years. And now, nowhere to be found. J.J. Jones showed some signs last year, had over 700 yards receiving. And for some reason, it's just not clicking right now. I do think that settling your quarterback battle will help you. Figuring out one guy that can build some chemistry with these guys, it will lead to some success. But these guys have to look at what they've done to start the season, and they have to figure out ways that they can get better. And yeah, maybe it is on the coaching staff. They have to take a serious look at that too. But if they don't get this ironed out, and you're still struggling going into conference play with no receiver stepping up, I think that could be a recipe for disaster. Another recipe for disaster could be the penalty issues, because they are back and they are maybe worse than ever. Against an FCS opponent, you committed 16 penalties in this game for 102 yards. That simply can't happen. I mean, for perspective, the North Carolina Central Eagles had 12 first downs that they got by themselves. Carolina gave them 4 by penalty. So a fourth of their first downs in this game came via penalty. That simply can't happen. And that's just on the defensive side of the ball. Now, that was the biggest issue. There were only 3 penalties on the offensive side of the ball. So 13 defensive penalties. That just can't happen. And especially in the first half, you had 10. That was the main reason that North Carolina Central was in this game. I mean, the thing is it was stressed by this staff in the offseason. So at this point, I mean, how concerned are you, and how in the world do you actually fix this? Because if it's being hammered home to them and this is still happening, I don't really know how much you can do.
Yeah, it really just shows, in my opinion, like, it starts with a lack of discipline. But I think at the college level, that's a coaching issue. I look at it, and they're not drilling it home enough in practice, and they're not punishing guys for the penalties in the game. I mean, Des Evans had 2 penalties on the first possession of the game and was not taken out.
Yep.
Simply put, that's inexcusable and downright pathetic. You look at the best programs in the sport, you commit a penalty, you get taken out. You think about committing a penalty, they take you out. We have guys committing penalties, stupid penalties, and being left in the game. I mean, Marcus Allen's taunting penalty was maybe the dumbest penalty I've seen in the history of football, because he didn't even do he didn't even make the play. Yeah. And was running his mouth. And I don't get how Mack Brown can sit up here and talk about this week after week, game after game, year after year, and we see no improvement. So it tells me that they're not following through on their end, because I don't know if it's allowed. Marcus Allen would have ran during a timeout. Like, he would have been on the field doing some sort of exercise for that type of penalty. So we can sit here and blame the players, and they're the one committing the penalties, but they're committing the penalties because the habit hasn't been broken. And the best way to break the habit is to either run them until they can't walk or bench them. And if that's the case, and then if that doesn't work, then you just simply don't play them at all. And at some point, that's got to be what this program does. Because I think more than anything, if they were to lose a game they should not lose this year, penalties will be as big a reason why. Because we're in year 5, and we're still committing the same stupid penalties we made when Mack Brown got back.
I mean, you look at the 2 drives that North Carolina Central scored on, it was penalties that kept those drives alive. Now, look, all of them weren't legit. The roughing the passer penalty on the one right before halftime where North Carolina Central kicks a field goal, that call on Des Evans was terrible. And we can all admit that. But the first 2, the ones that drove me the most insane, you talked about the Marcus Allen one. That one is just, come on, man. You are not even, you didn't do anything. You stood out there on that play. And you're taunting their sideline? Like, I don't understand. And yeah, well, you could have said, well, they were talking to us. They were an FCS team that was in the game against you. You should have destroyed that team. So yeah, of course they're going to be talking to you. But guess what? You know what you do if they're talking to you? Go celebrate with the rest of your teammates who were all celebrating. Like, the fact that we had to go back and take a wide-angle shot just to see you so that they could identify you as the guy that took the penalty, that's horrible, man. I'm sorry. You wouldn't have played the rest of the night after that because you just can't do that. But the thing is that he is much more talented than Tyrone Stewart. So, I mean, look, first 2 games of the year when they would have, when he would commit penalties, they would take him out of the game. And I think you can, but yeah, something has to be communicated that can't happen. Des Evans, the jumps offside, first play of the game. That really set them off on a bad foot. I knew the minute that he took that penalty, I said, oh my God, it's going to be a long night. Because you can feel when a penalty like that happens right out of the gate with a player that's as experienced as Des Evans, you knew, okay, this could be an issue. And then the bigger issue there was they left him on the field. You told us all offseason about how, you know what, we've got a guy in Bo Atkinson that's playing just as good as he is. We're going to rotate those guys at that spot. Why the hell wasn't Bo Atkinson put in the game at that point? Because you weren't playing Bo on the other side. No. You were playing Tyler Thompson, who had some good moments too. He was fine. Why did you not take him out of the game at that point? Because if you take him out of the game, possibly the roughing the passer penalty doesn't happen. Because that was horrible as well. But the amount of offsides penalties, I mean, they took, I know for sure it was at least 4. It may have been a 5th towards the end of the game. I mean, what the hell are we doing? That is basic football. You watch the football, you move when the football moves. I mean, come on, man. Like, it's simple stuff. It can't be happening that often. And especially against more talented teams. Like, this is the sad part, too. You went on the road to Minnesota and you committed 3 penalties for 45 yards against a team where you had to be that flawless because last year they were one of the least penalized. They were the 2nd least penalized team in the entire sport a year ago. You found a way to do it there. But in 2 home games, you have committed 24 penalties for 169 yards. How does that explain to me how that happens? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe something is just not connecting. But at home, you should be much better, especially with the pre-snap stuff. You should be much better at that stuff than anywhere when you have to go on the road. And guess what? You have to go to Duke. You have to go to Florida State, which, by the way, at this point, who knows what that – I mean, that should be a win on the schedule if we're counting that. But still, you have all of these road games later on in the year where you got to go to environments that are going to be rooting against you. So it does not make any sense to me. They have to get that cleaned up. And if they don't, then they could be in trouble. One other thing that I was a little concerned about, and don't worry, we'll get to the helmet stickers here where we'll point out some positives from this game, was the secondary. And look, you could say, well, the pass rush wasn't really that great. The pass rush, I don't think is the problem because you saw guys get pressure. I thought outside of the penalties, Des Evans had a great night. He was getting after the quarterback. Tyler Thompson, 2 quarterback pressures, graded out incredibly well as a pass rusher. Like, there's a lot to like about what those guys are doing so far this year. I mean, Jahvaree Ritzie didn't have a sack. He still had a pressure, and you could tell that Carolina's defensive line was still getting pretty decent push. The concern remains in the secondary, and it remains with one guy in particular. And I know he was named the defensive player of the game. I thought it was a better game from him. But he still let up a huge play down the field early, and I'm still concerned about Caleb Cost. That nickel corner spot, Carolina has had one good nickel corner in this last 3-year span. That was Elijah Huzzy. They moved him to the outside like they should have, and he's been tremendous out there. He hasn't even allowed 20 yards in coverage so far this season through the first 3 games. That's outstanding. But Caleb Cost, it's starting to remind me way too much of what we saw from DeAndre Boykins, where it is blown coverage after blown coverage. I mean, even the other night, he has 2 pass breakups. He has a diving interception. That's great. But he was hit and miss because he allowed 5 catches for 69 yards. I mean, after this game, are you starting to see a little bit of what I'm concerned about with him being so hit or miss? Or are you still saying I'm not really that concerned yet?
I mean, I think you go and you look at the first half. I mean, concerning is, I think, a strong word in a game where you gave up 91 yards passing. But I think you see the ingredients for this secondary to get picked apart at a time where you don't expect it to. I still think you put 7 back on the field. I think it makes everything in the back end look a little bit different. I don't know how much Chip Lindsey. I don't know how much Jeff Collins was wanting to show the other night. I still think that they know that they can kind of vanilla this thing up and kind of save some of the minister of defense, the minister of mayhem mantra that he brings for that road game at Duke when you're really going to need it again. But you could see where if Kamen Rucker doesn't get back as quickly as we want and need him to, that maybe there is some cause for concern. And so, I mean, you got to like the way that, once the game kind of settled in, I know that Central was playing a different quarterback that virtually couldn't throw the football. Yep. Like, I think that impacted the game as well. But to me, this one was more alarming because it was even a step down in competition from the week before against Charlotte, when Charlotte threw for over 300 yards, had 7 plays of 25 yards or more. And so I was more open to hearing that conversation after the first half on Saturday as I was opposed to after the game against the 49ers, despite there being a significant drop-off in production from the 2 games. And so, again, I think Carolina still is, adjusting to Jeff Collins. Jeff Collins may have known this roster when he took the job, but still has to figure out how to coordinate these players to put them in the best position to be successful. I just hope that if the answer becomes evident that Caleb Cost isn't the answer, that this staff will not be too stubborn to utilize the other guys in that secondary room to find the combination that works. That was the problem in recent years, was that the answer became evidently clear that X, Y, and Z wasn't working. And yet we trotted out X, Y, and Z and got told that's the best we have to offer, when in reality it felt like they were just not exhausting all options to find a combination that works. I don't think Jeff Collins, a guy that's motivated, understands how important this job is. If he ever wants to be a head coach again, I don't think he'll just sit on his hands and feet if he doesn't see what he wants to see from that room. And so we'll see where we're at after this week. If the room doesn't look any better, if Caleb Cost gets carved up like Thanksgiving turkey again, we have an honest conversation to have as we get ready for conference play.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is if he struggles in the first half of this game, then let's see what Trey Miller's got. Let's see what Ty White has, the true freshman, because you said that these guys are ready to play. We've seen true freshmen play at that spot before. Jaquarius Conley played that spot and was pretty successful. So give it a shot. That's all we're saying if he struggles. There's no guarantee, and I'm hoping that he gets that ironed out. But we got to see it. You can't be that hit and miss in coverage. All right, let's get to our helmet stickers for this game. If you guys don't know how this works, we give out helmet stickers to guys. There'll be 6 different players, or in my case, groups that we will hand out the helmet stickers to. Who does your first helmet sticker of this game go to?
Yeah, I'll take the easy way out to get us started. It's got to be Amarian Hampton, 25 carries, 210 yards, 3 tutties, a player of the game for Carolina offensively, ACC running back of the week, was the best player on the field Saturday evening in Chapel Hill, and after his big performance, is back on pace to have the special season we talked so much about in the preseason.
Yeah, you put the rundown together. So you took the 3 easiest fellas that you could possibly take, and I had to get a little bit more creative. So I'll go Bo Atkinson. 5 total tackles in this game, easily the most production that we've seen from him, and really started to look a little bit like Bo Atkinson. Was getting in the backfield, was causing issues, wreaking havoc, which is what you want to see from your guys on the edge, even if they're not making tackles in the backfield. This was the type of performance that you needed from him. And look, man, even though Des Evans performed really well in this game, if he continues to have issues with discipline, then at some point, Bo Atkinson is going to get more and more opportunities. So I think he took the advantage of that in this game. And I think it got his, after a slow start to the season, it may have got his season rolling just a little bit.
And number 2 for me, I went with John Copenhaver. Led Carolina in receiving. He had 6 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown. Really just felt happy for him because for 3 years I've talked about him becoming a big part of Carolina's passing game, and whether it was injuries or stubbornness by the play caller, never really saw that. But you really saw him become Jacoby Criswell's go-to target the other night. I think it'll be a big part of Carolina's offense moving forward. If not, I may have to go to Chapel Hill myself and have a talk with Chip Lindsey. So John Copenhaver gets my second helmet sticker from the win over North Carolina Central.
Yeah, really happy for him, especially after everything that happened last year. My second one, I'll go with Christian Hamilton. And you may say, well, he only had 1 catch in the game. 1 catch, 29 yards, the biggest play that we saw in the passing game all night. But then, his value on special teams, gets down there, recovers a fumble. You just saw hustle from him. And that's the thing that you like to see from a young wide receiver like that. A guy that, he's starting, but even with him starting, they're still playing him on special teams. For him to step up, land on that ball, and create an important turnover for Carolina, I thought was huge. Shout out to Christian Hamilton. He also was credited as one of the special teams players of the week by Mack Brown. So just a great performance from the young man.
And my last guy was a guy we were yelling about earlier, but Des Evans gets my last helmet sticker. 4 total tackles, all of them solo, 1 sack, 3 tackles for loss, a pass defended. I talked after the first 2 weeks that he was making plays that weren't showing up in the stat sheet. Was kind of making the equivalent of a hockey assist in basketball, making the play before the play. That continued on Saturday, but he got rewarded with some actual, stat production, and it made up for some of his bonehead penalties he had to start the game. He gets my final helmet sticker for the game.
Yeah, there's no denying that he played well. I mean, when you have 3 tackles for loss in a game, you're one of the best players on the field. It's just, can we tone down the penalties just a little bit? My final helmet sticker goes to the offensive line. Man, this was a beat-up unit, and I know it's an FCS opponent, but you had 2 guys that didn't start your season opener in there having to play massive reps for you. Jack Greenberg looked really good once again. You like what you saw, from the other guys that were starters, in the first 2 games of the season. I really think Howard Sampson, after that first week, he's recovered here these last 2 weeks. Now, things are going to get tougher. There's no doubt about that, and we can revisit him as we move along throughout the season. But I think you're seeing a guy that is starting to get a little bit more confident, and that's what we wanted from this group. And then Malik McGowan, you got to give him a tip of the hat. It wasn't perfect, but this is a guy that was forced to step into a starting role because Aiden Banfield couldn't go in this game, and held his own and showed why he was a guy that coming out of the spring was expected to be the starter at that position. So I got to give them my final helmet sticker. Well done. And to do it without your coach there, being coached by a guy that some of you guys played with last year, in terms of Lampkin and McGowan, a lot of the guys are new, but there are some guys in that room that did play with him a year ago. And then, a guy in Kyle Jolly who's just been helping you guys out. He hasn't been your full-time coach. That's a great job done by them. So they get my final helmet sticker. That's going to wrap it up, guys, for this edition of the podcast. Make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Momentarily, I will be putting up an article after we finish the podcast, talking a little bit more about the quarterback battle, and I'll tell you a little bit more what direction I think Carolina should go in. We'll dive into that a little bit more. Also, we'll have some important stuff coming out about injuries that we didn't get to here tonight on the podcast. There's only one real guy that it looks like is going to be out for sure against James Madison. That is Kamen Rucker, but a bunch of other guys that missed this past week, and Nate McCullum also banged up. So for all the latest on those guys, make sure you check the website. That'll be up tomorrow for you guys. We'll also get something up about Randy Clements and everything that he's going through right now. So all of that stuff will be on the website for you guys. And then, of course, the normal stock report, was hoping to get that up a little bit earlier this week, but with all the news that's come out, we're going to end up pushing that back into the middle of the week. And then, of course, we'll be getting you prepared with the preview of the game against James Madison, both on the podcast side of things and on the website. Podcast will definitely be up on Thursday night for you guys. Now, that will be recorded and then played back as if it is live. Just a shout out, just letting you guys know, so that if you do ask us questions in there and we're not answering them or we're not pulling them up on the screen, that has nothing to do with you guys. It's just that we have to record early because Josh has a big wedding over the weekend that he's got to get prepared for. Don't worry, it's not his own, so we don't have to worry about that. But no, he'll be enjoying himself over this weekend. He'll be locked in on Saturday, though. The wedding, smartly, is on Friday. Credit to you, Noah. What a tremendous job by knowing that it's football season. People want to watch college football on Saturday and the NFL on Sunday. But, so we'll have all that stuff for you guys. Thursday night will be the podcast, and then I'll see if I can get the article up on Thursday. Again, it just really depends with the job that we work. Things are changing all the time, just like today, as people know, if you're Panther fans. Huge news today about the quarterback situation for them. So, it just really depends, but it will be up for you guys either Thursday night or Friday for you guys to get prepared for the game against James Madison. So, a ton of great stuff on the website when it comes to the football side of things. But guess what, guys? Basketball is right around the corner, and some big stuff has been released lately. You have a new plan for what they're going to do with live action with Hubert Davis. It will no longer be called live action with Hubert Davis, but they are still going to scrimmage. Make sure you check out where that's going to be, what date it's going to be, and why they are moving that event. There's an article about that. You've got the scrimmage that Carolina will have against Memphis. Normally, we've seen it in years past that these are closed scrimmages. Well, no more. Now, this is a scrimmage that will be televised, and it will be for charity, for St. Jude's. Josh has all the information on that event up for you guys as well. And then also Carolina announcing that their annual exhibition, the game that happens right before the start of the season where they play a smaller school in the state of North Carolina, Johnson C. Smith will be the opponent. Josh has an article for you guys to read about that one as well. So make sure you check out all of that stuff on the website, And then you're back here on Thursday night for the next edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. But for now, Anthony Pagnotta signing off here on this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.